She tried to sell her beloved horse for $10, but the rancher offered her something worth more. By the time Abigail Wren reached the wide cedar gate of the Mason ranch, the money in her coat pocket felt heavier than iron and smaller than dust. It was not enough. She had counted it 3 times before leaving home. $4 and a few coins, wrapped in a handkerchief that still smelled faintly of flour from the kitchen table. She had earned part of it mending shirts for the women near Cedar Creek, part of it selling 2 jars of peach preserves she had meant to save for winter, and part of it from a neighbor who bought the last of her dried beans out of kindness and pretended she needed them. Still, it was not enough. $10. That was all Abigail needed before sundown to keep Mr. Silas Greer from filing papers at the county office. $10 to stop the late fees from growing. $10 to keep the last 40 acres her father had left her from slipping out of her hands like water through cracked fingers. And the only thing she owned that could bring that money was walking beside her. Star, her old white mare, moved with calm steps along the frozen wagon road, her breath rising in soft clouds. The mare's mane had picked up bits of dry grass from the paddock, and one of her ears twitched every time Abigail's skirt brushed against the saddle strap. Star had carried Abigail since she was 16. She had carried sacks of meal from town, water from the creek when the pump went bad, and Abigail's father home from the far pasture on the day his chest pain first knocked him from his feet. Now Abigail had brought her to be sold. She kept one hand on the reins and the other pressed against the folded notice in her pocket. The paper had been handled so many times that the edges had gone soft. She did not need to read it again. Every word had burned itself into her mind. Payment due by sundown. Her father used to say that losing land rarely began with storms. It began with small numbers a person hoped would change. $1 short here, 2 weeks late there, a bad roof before winter, feed bought on credit, a lender smiling too gently when he wrote your name in his book. Abigail had tried to prove him wrong. For 15 months after Henry Wren was laid in the little cemetery above Cedar Creek, she had worked the farm alone. She had fed chickens before daylight, hauled water when the well rope split, patched the barn roof with her own hands, and sat at the kitchen table by lantern light, sewing until her eyes watered. There were nights when she fell asleep with a needle still between her fingers. There were mornings when she woke with her neck stiff from leaning over accounts that would not balance. But pride could not be deposited at the lending office. And so she had come to Jacob Mason. Her father had trusted Jacob, not with many words because Henry Wren had never wasted them, but once near the end, he had gripped Abigail's wrist from his bed and said, "If the day ever comes when you must part with Star, take her to Mason. He knows horses. He will do right by her." At the time, Abigail had turned away and told him that day would never come. Now the Mason ranch rose before her, broad and steady in the pale November afternoon. 500 acres spread across the valley, fenced clean and worked hard. Cattle moved like dark spots against the tan grass. Smoke lifted from the big stone chimney of the ranch house. The barn stood tall enough to make Abigail's own barn look like a shed beside it. She stopped at the gate. For a moment she could not move. Star nudged her shoulder, gentle as a hand. "I know," Abigail whispered, though her voice trembled. "I know, girl." A man crossed the corral ahead, leading a young bay gelding in slow circles. He moved without hurry, with the patient strength of someone who understood that a frightened animal learned nothing from force. His hat shaded most of his face, but Abigail knew him. Everyone in Cedar Creek knew Jacob Mason. Quiet, fair, hardworking. A man with land enough to make him proud, though he never seemed proud of it. He looked up and saw her. Something changed in his posture, not alarm exactly, but attention. He handed the bay's rope to one of his ranch hands and walked toward the gate, dust clinging to the cuffs of his dark trousers. When he reached her, he removed his hat. "Miss Wren," he said, Mr. Mason. Her throat tightened. She had rehearsed the words on the road. She had planned to speak calmly, like a woman making a business arrangement. She had planned not to sound desperate. But the moment she looked at him, the rehearsed speech scattered. "I need you to buy Star," she said. Jacob's eyes moved from Abigail to the mare. Star stood quietly, her white coat dull from winter dust, her dark eyes soft and trusting. She looked nothing like a thing to be bargained over. She looked like history, like family, like the last living piece of a father's promise. Jacob did not answer too quickly. Abigail was grateful for that. A quick answer might have broken her. "How much are you asking?" he said at last. $10. His brow tightened just slightly, not because the price was high, but because they both knew it was far too low. "She's worth more," he said. "I know." "Then why 10? Abigail lifted her chin. "Because 10 is what I need." The ranch hand near the corral looked away, pretending not to hear. Wind moved through the bare cottonwoods along the creek. Somewhere behind the barn, a horse stamped once against the ground. Jacob rested one hand on the top rail of the gate. "What happens if you don't get it?" She swallowed. "Silas Greer files against my property in the morning. After that, fees get added. Then I lose more time, more money, and likely the farm." Jacob's face hardened at Greer's name, but his voice stayed even. "How much do you owe total?" "That is not why I came." "I understand." "No," she said, gripping the reins tighter. "I don't think you do. I am not asking for charity. I am not asking anyone to step in and take pity on Henry Wren's daughter. I am offering a horse for sale." He held her gaze then, and there was no pity in his eyes. That almost made it worse. "My father said you would treat her right," she continued, quieter now. "That is why I came here and not to the sale yard." Star breathed against her sleeve, warm and steady. Jacob looked at the mare for a long moment. Then he looked back at Abigail. "Your father was right to send you here." A sharp pain moved through her chest. She nodded once because if she spoke, she might not be able to stop herself from crying. Jacob opened the gate. "Come inside," he said. Abigail stiffened. "Mr. Mason, I don't have time for coffee." "I'm not offering coffee." "Then what are you offering?" He stepped aside so Star could pass through the gate, but his eyes stayed on Abigail. "Not a sale," he said. "Not if I can help it." She stared at him. The wind lifted a loose strand of hair across her cheek. Behind Jacob, the ranch house stood warm in the cold light, its windows catching the last gold of the day. Abigail thought of Greer's notice in her pocket. She thought of her father's hand closing around hers. She thought of the mare beside her, trusting every step. Jacob's voice softened, though it did not lose its firmness. "You came here asking me to buy your horse for $10, he said. "But I'd rather find a way for both of you to stay where you belong." Abigail's hand tightened around the reins. For the first time that day, the fear inside her shifted into something more dangerous than fear. Hope. And hope, she had learned, could hurt worse than hunger if a person trusted it too soon. Abigail followed Jacob Mason through the gate with Star walking close behind her, but every step felt like a mistake she could not afford to make. The Mason ranch yard was busy in a quiet, ordered way. A wagon stood near the barn with sacks of feed stacked straight in the back. 2 ranch hands were repairing a broken harness near the corral fence. Smoke drifted from the blacksmith shed, and the smell of hay, leather, and cold earth filled the air. It was the kind of place where nothing looked wasted. Even the old barrels beside the barn had been turned upside down neatly, as if someone had decided long ago that disorder was another kind of debt. Abigail noticed all of it, because noticing things was how she had survived. Jacob led Star toward a clean paddock beside the barn. The grass there was thin from winter, but the hay trough was full, and the fence rails were strong. Abigail's throat tightened again. Her own paddock had 2 loose posts and a gate that needed lifting every time it opened. She had promised herself she would fix it before snow came, but snow had come anyway. Jacob opened the paddock gate and waited. Abigail did not move. "If I put her in there," she said, "does that mean I have agreed to something?" "No," Jacob said. "It means your mare gets water while we talk." She looked at him, searching for some hidden catch. There was none on his face. That bothered her almost as much as if there had been. Slowly, she led Star inside. The mare lowered her head toward the hay as if she had no understanding that her whole life had just reached a turning point. Abigail rubbed the white blaze between Star's eyes. "You behave," she whispered. Star breathed softly into her palm. Jacob closed the gate, then nodded toward the house. "It's warmer inside." "I told you I don't have much time." "And I heard you." That was all he said. Inside, the ranch house felt too large for the number of people in it. The front room held a stone fireplace, a plain wooden table, and shelves full of ledgers, tools, and folded cloth that looked as if they had been placed there until someone found a proper home for them, then forgotten. A coat hung over the back of a chair. A flour sack sat near the pantry door. A stack of unpaid invoices lay under a coffee cup. Abigail saw the invoices without meaning to. Jacob noticed her noticing. "My housekeeper married a freight man in August," he said. "She went east with him." "That was 3 months ago." "Yes." "You haven't hired another?" "No." She looked at the flour sack, then at the pantry. That explained some things. For the first time since she arrived, the corner of Jacob's mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it came close enough to surprise her. "I imagine it does." He took the kettle from the stove and poured hot coffee into 2 cups. She almost refused, but the warmth of the room had begun to make her hands shake. She sat at the table because her legs had suddenly remembered the miles she had ridden and all the nights she had not slept enough. Jacob placed a cup in front of her and sat across from her. "Tell me the exact terms," he said. Abigail wrapped both hands around the cup. "There is nothing to tell." "Miss Wren." The way he said her name made it clear he would wait longer than she could. She took a breath. "My father borrowed $25 after the roof caved in on the east side of the barn. He paid some before he died. I paid more after. The principal is nearly gone, but I missed 2 payments. One after the fall market, when I lost 4 days of sewing work because my wrist swelled so badly I could hardly hold a needle. The other last week, because the feed bill came first." Jacob listened without interrupting. "Greer says with interest and penalty I owe $14 by sundown. I have 4 and some coins. I need 10. And after that?" She stared into the coffee. "After that I keep working." "How much remains?" $8 on the principal. "Monthly payment?" $2. Jacob leaned back slightly. His eyes moved toward the scattered invoices on the shelf. Abigail could almost see the arithmetic turning behind them. "I can pay you wages," he said. She looked up sharply. "For what?" "For work." "I have work." "You have too much work and not enough money for it." Her face warmed. "That is my concern. It became partly mine when you brought your horse to my gate." "No," she said, "that is exactly what it did not become." The room went quiet. Outside, a horse shifted in the yard. Somewhere overhead, a board creaked. The fire settled with a soft pop. Jacob set his cup down. "You are right." Abigail blinked. She had expected argument, correction, perhaps some careful speech about neighbors helping neighbors. She had not expected him to agree. He continued, "Your debt is yours, your farm is yours, your horse is yours. I have no right to make choices for you." "Then why did you bring me inside?" "Because I need someone capable, and you need $10. She narrowed her eyes. Capable of what? He gestured toward the room, not proudly but honestly. This house has no system. The pantry is a mess. The accounts are worse. My ranch hands eat whatever can be found and complain when it cannot be found. Supplies get ordered twice or not at all. I know cattle, fences, grazing, breeding lines, weather signs, and how long a horse needs before it trusts a rope. I do not know how to keep this house from slowly turning into a storage shed with a chimney. Despite everything, Abigail almost laughed. She caught it before it escaped. Jacob saw that too. I need a household manager, he said. Someone to handle provisions, accounts, meals, schedules, and the parts of this ranch I keep failing to give proper attention. I will pay $3 a week. Abigail stared at him. $3 a week, more than she made in many weeks sewing until midnight, enough to pay Greer, enough to buy feed, enough to keep the farm breathing while she found her footing. But it sounded too neat, too kind, too much like rescue wearing work clothes. And Star, she asked. She stays here during the day if you ride over. Better feed, good shelter. If storms make the ride foolish, there is an empty room upstairs. Her eyes hardened at that. I'm not moving into a ranch house because a man feels sorry for me. I did not ask you to. But you mentioned the room. Because winter is coming, and I am not in the habit of pretending weather is gentler than it is. She looked away. On the table, her handkerchief of coins sat like proof of failure. She hated that he could see it. She hated more that he did not look at it with pity. You would advance the 10, she asked. Yes, against wages. And you would write that down. Yes. With terms. Yes. And I decide when Star leaves this property. Yes. And if I choose to keep riding from my farm every day, you will not argue. I might advise against it in a blizzard. I will not command it. She held his gaze for a long moment. Jacob Mason did not look like a man offering charity. He looked like a man setting a fence post straight and expecting it to hold. Why, she asked. Because I need the work done. No, why me? His answer did not come quickly. He looked toward the window, where Star's white shape showed beyond the glass in the paddock. Because your father told me once that you kept better books than any man in Cedar Creek, he said. Because I have seen your kitchen lamp burning after midnight from the ridge more times than I can count. Because pride like yours can keep a person standing, but it can also keep them alone too long. Abigail's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. My father said that. He did. A silence moved between them, heavy and tender. Jacob stood and crossed to a small desk near the wall. He took out a leather pouch, counted $10 in bills and coins, and laid them on the table. Then he took a blank page from a ledger and wrote carefully, line by line, the terms he had spoken. $3 a week, $10 advanced, work to begin Wednesday, no sale of horse, no claim on Wren property. Either party may end the arrangement with proper notice. He turned the paper toward her. Abigail read every word. Then she read it again. Her father had taught her that if a man disliked putting terms on paper, he usually intended to change them later. Jacob had written them without being asked twice. Her eyes stung, but she forced her voice steady. I will take the position. Jacob gave one nod, as if she had accepted a fair trade and nothing more. Abigail signed her name. He signed his. When she rose from the table, the sun had already begun to lower toward the western ridge. She folded the $10 into her handkerchief with the rest of her money and tucked it inside her coat. At the door, she paused and looked back at him. Mr. Mason. Yes. If this becomes charity, I will leave. I know. If you speak to Greer for me, I will leave. I understand. If any man on this ranch thinks I came here because I was helpless, he will learn different before supper. This time Jacob did smile, just a little. I expect he will. Abigail stepped outside into the cold afternoon. Star lifted her head from the paddock, ears forward, as if asking whether they were going home. Not sold, Abigail whispered when she reached her. Not today. She rode into Cedar Creek, with the sun burning low and fear, chasing her shadow all the way down the road. Silas Greer was waiting behind his desk when she entered the lending office. His smile faded when she placed $14 in front of him. There, she said, before sundown. Greer counted it slowly, as if hoping the coins might disappear under his fingers. They did not disappear, Abigail said. His eyes lifted. She took the receipt from him, folded it once, and walked out before her knees could weaken. Only when she reached Star outside did she press her forehead to the mare's neck and let herself breathe. The farm was not saved forever. The debt was not gone. But the auction notice would not come in the morning. And somewhere behind her, on the far side of the valley, a man she barely understood had opened a door without taking away her dignity. That should have comforted Abigail. Instead, it frightened her. Because losing land was one kind of danger. Trusting someone with the broken places of your life was another. Abigail began work at the Mason Ranch on Wednesday morning with her hair pinned tight, her father's old ledger pencil in her pocket, and no intention of being grateful where she was only being paid. She told herself that twice on the ride over. The air had a hard edge to it, the kind that warned of snow even when the sky stayed clear. Star moved briskly beneath her, as if she approved of the arrangement far more than Abigail did. The mare remembered the full hay trough. Horses, Abigail had learned, were honest creatures, but not sentimental about poor arrangements when better ones appeared. "You are not helping," Abigail muttered. Star flicked one ear back and kept walking. The Mason Ranch was already awake when she arrived. Men crossed the yard with buckets, ropes, and fence tools. Cattle lowed in the distance. A rooster crowed late, as if surprised morning had come without asking him. Jacob stood near the barn door speaking to one of his hands, his hat low against the wind. When he saw Abigail ride in, he ended the conversation and came toward her. "Morning, Miss Wren." "Mr. Mason." His eyes moved briefly to the folded paper sticking from her coat pocket, the receipt from Greer. He did not ask to see it. That earned him one small measure of respect. "Star's paddock is ready," he said. "I saw. There is grain in the bin. Use what she needs." "I will use what is fair." Jacob nodded. "Fair is what I meant." Abigail climbed down and led Star to the paddock herself. She would not have any man taking the mare from her hands as if this place had become Star's home already. Star, however, stepped through the gate with humiliating ease and went straight to the hay. "You could pretend to miss me," Abigail whispered. The mare began eating. When Abigail turned, she found a tall ranch hand leaning against the barn wall, watching with a lazy sort of curiosity. He had sandy hair, a narrow face, and a grin that suggested he enjoyed trouble best when it happened to other people. "You the new housekeeper?" he asked. "Household manager," Abigail said. His grin widened. "That different?" "Yes." "How?" "A housekeeper cleans up after men. A household manager teaches them to stop making the mess twice." The man stared at her. From behind them, Jacob made a sound that might have been a cough. The ranch hand pushed off the wall. "Name S. Eli Tucker." "Then I will remember where to send the first correction, Mr. Tucker." Eli's grin faded just enough to show he was deciding whether to be amused or offended. He settled on amused. "Good luck in there. Pantry's got its own weather." "So I have heard." Abigail walked into the house with her shoulders square and her stomach tight. The pantry was worse than she expected. Flour sat near lamp oil. Salt pork had been stored above dried apples. Coffee beans were open to mice, though none had yet been bold enough to make themselves known. 3 sacks of sugar had been bought because no one had found the first 2. Nails, candles, molasses, boot grease, and dried onions all occupied the same shelf in a way that suggested the previous system had been based on whoever shouted loudest at the door. Abigail stood in the pantry doorway for a full minute. Then she rolled up her sleeves. By noon, she had emptied every shelf. By 2, she had washed them. By 4, she had sorted supplies into proper order, made a list of what was spoiled, what was missing, and what had been bought twice. By 5, she had discovered that the Mason Ranch had enough beans to feed 10 men through Easter, but not enough flour to make bread past Friday. Eli appeared in the kitchen doorway while she was tying labels to jars. "Where's the sugar?" "On the second shelf, in a covered tin, away from the lamp oil." It was easier to find before. It was easier to burn the house down before, too. He looked toward the pantry, then back at her. "Mr. Mason know you moved everything." "Mr. Mason hired me to manage the household." The sugar was part of the household. It was trying to become part of the fire. Eli opened his mouth, closed it, and then laughed once under his breath. "You always talk like a schoolteacher with a hammer." Only when men ask questions like children standing near matches. He tipped his hat and backed out. "Yes, ma'am." "I am not old enough for ma'am." "Yes, Miss Wren." "That will do." When Jacob came in at supper, the table was set. The room smelled of fresh bread, fried potatoes, beans warmed with onion, and coffee strong enough to wake a man who had been dead since spring. Abigail had cooked without thinking much about it. A ranch needed food. Men working outside in November needed more than scraps and complaints. Jacob paused in the doorway. His gaze moved from the clean table to the reorganized shelves, then to the bread cooling near the stove. "The flour moved," he said. "Yes. Far. Where flour belongs." He considered this. "I see." "You will, once you learn where that is." Eli, already seated at the table, lowered his head quickly. His shoulders moved. Jacob looked at him. "Something funny?" "No, sir." Abigail ladled beans into a bowl and set it down a little harder than necessary. "There is nothing funny about flour being stored beside kerosene." "No, Miss Wren," Eli said, still fighting his smile. The men ate as if they had forgotten food could be served hot and on time. Abigail did not sit with them. She stood near the counter, making notes in a small book, marking what needed to be ordered from Cedar Creek and what could wait. Jacob noticed. "There's a place at the table," he said. "I am working." "You can work after eating." "I ate before I came." That was a lie. Not a large one, but large enough that her stomach chose that moment to turn hollow and loud. Eli heard it. Jacob heard it. Abigail pretended neither had. Jacob did not call her out before the men. Instead, he reached for the bread, cut a thick slice, spread it with butter, and placed it on a small plate at the end of the counter beside her notebook. "For when you are no longer working," he said. He returned to his meal without looking at her again. It was such a small kindness that Abigail almost hated him for it. Pity would have been easier to refuse. A lecture could have been answered. But a slice of bread placed quietly within reach left no room for anger unless she wished to look foolish. She waited until the men were speaking about cattle prices. Then she ate it in 3 careful bites. After supper, Jacob brought the main account books to the kitchen table. Abigail sat across from him with a lamp between them and began reading. By the 3rd page, she frowned. By the 5th, she removed the pencil from her pocket. By the 7th, she stopped being polite. You paid Murdoch Supply twice for the same shipment of oats. Jacob leaned forward. What? Here, October 9th, then again October 21st, same invoice number. He took the ledger and examined it. That cannot be right. It is written in your hand. That does not improve my confidence. She glanced at him and almost smiled. Almost. She turned another page. You also paid $11 for harness leather that was priced at $7. Murdoch said the rate went up. Did he say that before or after he wrote $7 on the bill? Jacob went still. Eli, passing through the back hall with an armload of kindling, slowed down. Abigail did not look up. Keep walking, Mr. Tucker. Yes, Miss Wren. His boots moved quickly away. Jacob sat back in his chair. The lamplight caught the tired lines at the corners of his eyes. For the first time, Abigail saw not the owner of 500 acres, but a man who had been carrying too many tasks for too long and failing only at the ones one could see from the road. How much? He asked. I don't know yet. But you think there is more. I think your suppliers discovered you do not read your own invoices closely. His jaw tightened. I read them. No, you look at them, then you pay them. The words came out sharper than she intended. She expected him to bristle. He did not. Instead, he looked at her father's pencil in her hand. Henry taught you well. The pencil stilled. Abigail kept her eyes on the ledger. He taught me because he said figures had no mercy. He told me something like that once. She looked up despite herself. Jacob's voice softened. He said a man could survive a dry summer if he had kept his books clean, but a careless ledger could ruin him in good weather. A sudden ache opened in Abigail's chest. She could almost hear her father saying it, seated at their kitchen table, his sleeves rolled, his spectacles low on his nose. He said that often, she murmured. He talked about you often, too. Her fingers tightened around the pencil. Jacob seemed to realize he had stepped onto tender ground. He did not move closer. He did not press. He simply sat there, steady and quiet. What did he say? She asked before she could stop herself. That you noticed what others missed. That you were stubborn. That if Cedar Creek had sense, it would hire you to count every dollar in the territory. A laugh escaped her, small and broken. She turned it into a cough and looked down. Jacob looked away, giving her privacy over the table between them. For the next hour, they worked in silence. Abigail marked every mistake she found. Jacob fetched invoices from drawers, shelves, and one boot box under the writing desk. She made no comment on the boot box, though it pained her to ignore it. When the clock neared 9, Jacob closed the ledger. That is enough for one night. I can finish this stack. You can, you won't. Her head lifted. Are you giving me orders already? No, I'm stating that tired eyes make mistakes. My eyes are fine. They are red. So are yours. I am not the one holding the pencil. She wanted to argue, but the numbers had begun to blur. That angered her because he was right. Jacob stood and took his coat from the chair. I'll walk you to Star. I know the way to the barn. I know. He did not say more. He only opened the door. The cold struck hard after the warmth of the kitchen. The yard lay silver under a rising moon. Star stood in the paddock, ears forward, looking entirely satisfied with her day. Abigail rubbed the mare's neck before tightening the saddle strap. Jacob waited a few steps away. You did good work today, he said. I did paid work. Yes. The answer pleased her more than praise would have. She mounted Star and gathered the reins. The farm waited 12 minutes away in the dark. with its weak fence and cold stove and account book still open on her own kitchen table. Jacob looked toward the road, snow by morning. "I know. If it comes hard, do not ride. I decide that." "Yes," he said, "you do." That stopped her. He had not said it with challenge. He had said it like a man reminding himself of the terms he had agreed to. Abigail studied him in the moonlight, unsure what to do with a man who could be firm, without being cruel and helpful, without placing a hand on her life. "Good night, Mr. Mason." "Good night, Miss Wren." She rode out through the gate and down the road toward her farm. Behind her, the Mason Ranch windows glowed warm against the November dark. Ahead of her, the Wren place sat quiet beneath the hill, waiting as it always did. But for the first time in many months, Abigail felt the shape of change following her. And she could not tell yet whether it had come to save her peace or take it from her. If you believe one honest offer can change the road ahead, stay with Abigail's story, because the next morning will bring more than snow to Cedar Creek. Snow came before dawn. It began as a whisper against the roof of the Wren farmhouse, soft enough that Abigail heard it only because sleep had not held her tightly. She opened her eyes in the gray dark and lay still, listening. A loose shutter tapped near the kitchen. The stove had gone cold hours earlier. Beneath her quilt, her feet ached with the deep chill that settled into old houses no matter how carefully a person stuffed rags around the window frames. For one quiet moment, she wanted to stay exactly where she was. Then she remembered the Mason ledgers. She sat up. By the time she dressed, lit the stove, fed the chickens, and carried water through a wind that cut straight through her coat, the snow had thickened. It slanted across the yard, hiding the far fence and softening the broken edges of the barn. Star stood in the paddock with Frost along her mane, watching Abigail with patient disapproval. "You heard him," Abigail said, tightening her scarf. "He said if it came hard, I should not ride." Star blinked. "And I said I'd decide that." The mare did not seem impressed. Abigail checked the sky. The clouds were low, but the road to Mason Ranch was familiar. 12 minutes in fair weather, perhaps 20 in snow. She had ridden worse with her father years before, when a sick calf needed medicine from town and the whole valley had turned white by noon. She saddled Star. The first half-mile was manageable. Snow gathered along the brim of Abigail's hat and melted cold against her cheeks. Star placed each hoof with care, ears forward, steady as ever. But by the time they reached the low creek crossing, the world had narrowed. The road disappeared beneath white drifts. Cottonwood branches bent under the weight of snow, and the creek made a dark sound beneath thin ice. Abigail urged Star down the bank. The mare stopped. "Come on, girl," Abigail whispered. Star took one step, then another. The ice near the edge cracked, not deep enough to break, but loud enough to send a sharp fear through Abigail's chest. Star shifted back at once. Abigail looked across the creek. The far bank was only a few yards away, blurred by snow. Beyond it lay the road to the Mason Ranch, work, wages, order, and the chance to keep moving instead of sitting alone in a cold house counting debts that had already been counted. She tried again. Star refused. Not stubbornly, not fearfully, wisely. Abigail closed her eyes for one breath. Her father's voice came back to her, as plain as if he stood beside the creek. "A horse with sense is worth listening to." She turned Star around. The ride back felt longer. By the time she reached the Wren farm, her gloves were wet and her skirt stiff with frozen snow. She led Star into the barn, rubbed her down, and stood for a moment with both hands against the mare's warm neck. "You were right," Abigail said. Star nudged her shoulder, forgiving but smug. Inside the house, Abigail built the fire high and sat at the kitchen table with her own ledger. She sharpened her pencil with a small knife, then tried to work through her figures. But the numbers on the page kept turning into Jacob Mason's face in the lamplight, his voice saying, "You decide that." He had not argued. That was the trouble with him. A man who argued could be resisted. A man who commanded could be defied. But Jacob had a way of leaving a choice in her hands and making her feel the weight of it properly. Near midday, someone knocked. Abigail froze. No one came to the Wren farm in weather like this unless something was wrong or someone wanted something. She crossed to the window and wiped a circle through the frost with her sleeve. Jacob Mason stood on her porch, snow on his hat and shoulders, holding a cloth-covered basket in one hand. Her first feeling was relief. Her second was annoyance at the relief. She opened the door before he could knock again. "You rode here in this," she said. He looked past her toward Star's tracks in the yard, already filling with snow. "So did you, it seems." "I turned back." "I'm glad." "I didn't turn back because you told me to." "I didn't think you had." The wind pushed snow across the porch between them. His horse stood near the fence, head low, tail dusted white. Jacob lifted the basket slightly. "Eli's aunt sent stew yesterday. Too much for us. I thought you might not want to cook if the weather held you here." Abigail looked at the basket. "That sounds dangerously close to charity." "It is stew," he said. "Stew can be charity." "Not this one, it was excess stew." She stared at him. His face remained serious. Despite herself, Abigail felt her mouth tremble with the beginning of a smile. She turned away before he saw too much of it. "You may come in before you freeze on my porch," she said. Jacob stepped inside and removed his hat. He did not look around with the rude curiosity of a man judging another person's poverty. He simply stood near the door and waited until she pointed to a chair. The kitchen was small and worn but clean. A patched curtain hung over the window. The table had been scrubbed so often the grain had faded smooth. On the wall beside the stove hung her father's old hat, the one she had not been able to move since the funeral. Jacob saw it. His gaze paused only a second, then lowered respectfully. Abigail noticed. She took the basket and uncovered a pot wrapped in towels, a small loaf of bread, and a jar of apple butter. Her throat tightened at the smell of warm stew. "Excess," she said quietly. "A considerable amount of excess." "How many men were you planning to feed with this little pot?" "None who will suffer." She carried it to the stove. "You should not have come all this way." "I needed to check the north fence line." "The north fence line is not near my house." "It is nearer than the south fence line." This time she did smile, though she kept her back to him. He sat at the table, and for a few moments neither spoke. The room filled with the small sounds of winter, the stove ticking, wind pulling at the eaves, snow brushing the window. Then Jacob said, "Greer came to the ranch this morning." Abigail's hand stilled on the spoon. She turned slowly. "Why?" "He said he heard you had taken work with me." Cedar Creek hears everything before the person involved has finished doing it. "Yes." "What did he want?" Jacob's expression changed, not much but enough. The softness left his eyes. "He asked whether your wages would be paid directly to him." Abigail felt heat rise in her face. "He asked you that?" "Yes." "And what did you say?" "I told him your wages belonged to you." She gripped the edge of the stove. "Did he say anything else?" "He suggested it would be simpler if I allowed him to handle the balance of your account." Abigail laughed once without humor. "Simple for him." "That was my understanding." "You had no right to discuss my account." "I didn't." The answer was immediate. She looked at him. Jacob leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hat resting between his hands. He spoke. I told him any matter between him and you was not mine to arrange. I also told him not to come to my ranch looking for authority over your wages. Her anger faltered, confused by the shape of his answer. You said that. Yes. Exactly. No, I used fewer words. The stove popped sharply, and outside a gust of wind pressed snow hard against the glass. Abigail turned back to the stew because her face had become difficult to manage. She had spent 15 months defending the edges of her life alone. She had answered creditors, neighbors, market women, repairmen, and men who spoke slowly to her as if widowhood or grief had stolen her sense. To hear that Jacob had not stepped over the line, even when Greer invited him to, shook something inside her. I would have handled him, she said. I know. Then why tell me? Because he came to my ranch about your money. You had a right to know. She set the spoon down. For a moment the words would not come, not because they were hard, but because gratitude sat too close to them. Thank you, she said at last. Jacob nodded once, accepting it without making it heavier. She placed a bowl of stew in front of him and another across from him. I thought this was for me, he said. You brought too much excess. Yes, I see that now. They ate at her kitchen table while the storm pressed around the little house. Abigail told him about the creek crossing and Star's refusal. Jacob listened without any trace of "I told you so," which she appreciated more than she wanted to admit. Good mare, he said. The best. Your father chose well. He usually did. Jacob looked toward the old hat on the wall. He came to my place once during a storm worse than this. Abigail's spoon paused. He did. 4 winters ago, one of my calves had slipped into a frozen wash. I was trying to pull it out alone and making poor work of it. Henry rode up like he had been sent. Didn't say much. Just tied his rope right, told me mine was wrong, and saved us both an hour. That sounds like him. He told me afterward that a man who owns good rope should learn how to use it before the cow needs saving. Abigail laughed softly. That sounds even more like him. Jacob looked down at his bowl. He was a good neighbor. He was a good father. Yes, Jacob said, I know. The words were simple, but something in the way he said them made Abigail look up. It was not a polite answer. It held certainty, as if Jacob had seen proof of Henry Wren's fatherhood in more than stories. The question rose in her mind, but before she could ask, a loud crack split through the storm. Abigail stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. That came from the barn. Jacob was on his feet before she reached the door. They ran into the white blur of the yard. Snow stung Abigail's face. The barn door had blown loose, banging hard against the outer wall. One of the old hinges had split from the frame, and the lower rail of Star's stall gate hung crooked. Inside, Star tossed her head, frightened but unhurt. Abigail pushed toward her, but Jacob caught the broken barn door before the wind could tear it free. Get her calm, he called. I'll hold this. Abigail reached Star and placed both hands on the mare's neck. Easy, girl, easy now, I'm here. The mare trembled beneath her palms. Abigail murmured the same nonsense words her father had used when storms frightened the animals, soft and steady, until Star lowered her head. When she turned back, Jacob was bracing the barn door with his shoulder, snow blowing around him, jaw tight from the strain. That hinge won't hold, he said. I know. Do you have spare nails? In the tool chest. He looked toward it. May I? The question struck her, even in the storm. May I? Not move aside, not let me fix it, not this is no work for you. May I? She nodded. Together they worked in the freezing barn while the storm beat against the roof. Jacob held the door in place. Abigail found the nails, the hammer, and a strip of old iron her father had saved for repairs. Her fingers went numb twice. Jacob offered his gloves once. She refused. He did not offer again. By the time the door was secured, daylight had thinned into early dusk. The repair was rough, but it would hold until morning. Abigail stood in the barn, breathing hard, snow melting in her hair. Jacob's coat was white across the shoulders. His hands were red from the cold. She looked at the fixed hinge, then at him. "That was my father's hammer," she said. Jacob glanced at the tool in her hand. "It has good weight." He said a hammer should feel like it knows what it is for. Jacob's eyes softened. He would. The quiet that followed felt different from the silence in the kitchen, warmer, more dangerous. Outside, the storm began to ease. Jacob stepped back toward the barn door. "It'll hold." "Yes. I should ride before dark settles fully." She wanted to say yes, that would be sensible. Instead, she looked toward the road, already half buried again. The sky had gone iron gray. Wind moved loose snow in twisting sheets across the yard. "You should not ride in that," she said. Jacob turned. The words had come out before she could protect herself from them. Abigail folded her arms, as if that would make them practical instead of personal. "There is room in the barn for your horse," she added, "and the front room has a chair. It is not comfortable, but it is dry." Jacob studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "A dry chair is better than a proud funeral." "That is not funny." "No," he said, "but it is true." Abigail looked away first. That night, Jacob Mason stayed at the Wren farm while snow covered the valley and hid both roads from sight. He slept in the front room chair with his coat folded under his head and his boots near the fire. Abigail lay awake in the bedroom, listening to the wind and the quiet breathing of a man who had crossed a storm to bring excess stew, refused to take charge of her life, asked before touching her father's tools, and helped mend a barn door without once making her feel small. Near midnight, she rose and stepped softly into the kitchen. The fire had burned low. Jacob was asleep, one hand resting near the hat on his chest. In the faint light, he looked less like the richest rancher in the valley and more like a tired man who had forgotten how to be cared for. Abigail stood there longer than she meant to. Then she took an extra quilt from the cedar chest and laid it gently over him. He did not wake. But Star, watching through the small barn window beyond the yard, lifted her head into the snowy dark, as if she knew something Abigail was not ready to name. Morning came white and silent over the Wren farm. The storm had spent itself sometime before dawn, leaving the world buried beneath a clean sheet of snow. Fence posts showed only their dark tops. The low creek beyond the cottonwoods had vanished under drift and ice. The barn roof glittered pale in the first week light, and the old road toward Cedar Creek was no longer a road at all, only a soft rise across the valley where wagon wheels had once cut through mud. Abigail woke with a start, unsure at first why the house felt different. Then she remembered. Jacob Mason was sleeping in her front room. For one foolish second, her heart moved before her sense did. She sat up quickly, scolding herself before her feet touched the cold floor. He had stayed because of the storm, nothing more. A man could sleep in a chair under a borrowed quilt without it meaning the whole world had tilted. A woman could worry whether he had been warm enough without that worry becoming anything dangerous. Still, when she stepped quietly into the kitchen, she looked toward the front room first. The chair was empty. The quilt had been folded neatly and placed over the back. His boots were gone from the hearth. For one sudden breath, she felt abandoned, which was so unreasonable that she grew angry at herself for feeling it. Then she heard the thud of an axe outside. She crossed to the window and wiped frost from the glass. Jacob stood near the woodpile splitting logs in the morning cold. His coat was buttoned high, his hat pulled low, his movements steady and practiced. He had already cleared a narrow path from the porch to the barn. His horse stood beside Star in the barnyard, saddled but calm. Star watched him as if she had hired him herself. Abigail opened the door. "You do not have to chop my wood," she called. Jacob paused with the axe in his hands. "Good morning." "That is not an answer." "No," he said, "it was a greeting." "I have wood." "You had wet wood." "I would have managed." "I know." The simple answer took the wind out of her anger before it had properly risen. She hated that he had learned how to do that. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Then, why are you doing it?" He set a split log on the pile. "Because I was awake and the axe was there." "That is the most dangerous kind of man." "What kind?" "The kind who sees work and starts doing it." His eyes lifted to hers, and there was warmth in them despite the cold. "I have been accused of worse." Abigail stepped back inside before her cheeks could blame the weather for what they were doing. She made coffee and warmed the last of the stew. By the time Jacob came in, stamping snow from his boots at the door, she had placed 2 cups on the table and cut bread into even slices. He paused when he saw the place set for him. "You don't have to feed me," he said. She looked at him over the rim of the coffee pot. "Good morning." For a second he stared. Then he understood and lowered his eyes, almost smiling. "That is not an answer." "No," she said, "it was a greeting." He sat. They ate with the quiet ease of people who were both trying not to notice the ease. Abigail asked about the road to Mason Ranch. Jacob said it would take work but could be crossed by midday if the wind stayed down. He asked about the Wren roof. She said it held. He asked about the barn door. She said their repair was ugly but sound. He accepted that as praise. After breakfast, he went to harness his horse. Abigail followed him to the barn, more because Star needed checking than because Jacob was leaving. That was what she told herself. Star stood dry and content, nosing at hay. The broken hinge had held through the night, though the old frame showed more rot than Abigail had wanted to admit. Jacob ran one hand along the damaged wood. "This needs more than nails." "I know. Before the next storm." "I know that too." He turned toward her slowly, as if measuring his words before setting them down. "I can send Eli with lumber tomorrow." "No." He did not look surprised. "You can pay for the lumber out of wages." "No." "Then I can sell it to you at cost." "No." "May I ask which part is the problem?" "All of it." A faint crease appeared between his brows. Abigail folded her arms. "I will not have men from your ranch riding over here and fixing my farm as if I have become one of your broken fences. That is not how I see you. It may be how others see it." His face grew serious. "Others talk whether a person earns it or not." "I know. I have been the subject of talk since the funeral." Jacob looked down at the hinge, then at her. "What if the lumber is delivered and you repair it yourself?" She hesitated. He saw the hesitation and did not push. "You have the skill," he said. "You need dry boards, that is not weakness." "I would pay." "Yes." "At full cost." "At cost, I am not a lumber merchant." "At fair cost." "Fair cost," he agreed. She studied him, trying to find the trap. There was none, unless patience itself counted as one. "Fine," she said. "Boards only, no men, no fixing." "Boards only." "And Eli does not carry them into the barn." "I will tell him." "If he tries, I will hand him a hammer and make him repair the chicken coop instead." "I will warn him thoroughly." This time she smiled before she could stop it. Jacob saw it. He did not mention it. That, too, earned him another small measure of respect. By the time he left, the sun had climbed high enough to turn the snow painfully bright. Abigail stood on the porch and watched him ride toward the hidden road. He moved slowly, letting his horse choose safe footing. Halfway to the creek, he turned once and lifted a hand. She lifted hers back. Only after he vanished beyond the cottonwoods did she realize she was still standing in the cold. The next week changed the shape of Abigail's days. She worked at Mason Ranch from morning until evening, then returned to the Wren farm before dark when the weather allowed. On hard days, she stayed long enough to finish accounts by lamplight while Jacob read supply letters across the table. The first corrected invoice arrived from Murdoch Supply with an apology so stiff it might as well have been written in fence wire. $11 returned. Then another came from a grain merchant. $3.40 credited. Then a third, not large enough to change a life alone, but large enough to prove Abigail had been right. Jacob placed each letter in front of her without ceremony. "You found this," he said the first time. "The ledger found it, I only read it." "You read what I missed." "Yes," she said, "that is what you pay me for. It is worth more than $3 a week." Her eyes sharpened. He held up one hand. That was a statement, not a change in terms. "Good. But when the first month is complete, I would like to discuss new terms." "That is allowed." "Discuss," he said, "not decide." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are learning." "I am trying." Eli, who was passing behind them with a basket of kindling, muttered, "Lord help us, he's becoming civilized." Abigail did not look up. "Mr. Tucker, if that kindling is headed for the front room, stack it bark side down or take it back outside and practice until you can." Eli stopped walking. "Wood has a correct side now." "Everything has a correct side when people stop being careless." He looked at Jacob. "You hear what you brought into this house." Jacob's eyes remained on his papers. "Order." "Tyranny," Eli said. "Efficient tyranny," Abigail corrected. Eli shook his head and carried the kindling away, bark side down. Small laughter began appearing in the Mason house after that. Not loud laughter, not the careless kind, but the sort that slipped into corners where silence had lived too long. Abigail heard it when Eli found the sugar without asking and acted as if he had won a bet. She heard it when Jacob tried to compliment a batch of bread and said it was structurally excellent, causing one of the younger hands to choke on coffee. She heard it once from herself, sharp and startled, when Star stole a biscuit from Eli's hand and walked away with no shame at all. The house changed under her hands. The pantry became useful. The accounts became clear. Meals arrived on time. Supplies stopped going missing. The men learned not to leave muddy boots near the kitchen door after Abigail placed all 4 pairs on the porch roof and made their owners retrieve them while Jacob pretended not to see. But with order came talk. It reached Abigail on a Saturday morning at Cedar Creek Market. She had gone to buy needles, thread, and coffee. Star was tied outside the general store, bright and healthy from better feed. Abigail had just stepped to the counter when 2 women near the fabric shelves lowered their voices badly enough that she could hear every word. "That Wren girl is at Mason's every day now." "Every day and some evenings." "I suppose work is what they call it." Abigail's hand tightened around the spool of thread. The storekeeper pretended to count nails. One woman continued, "A woman alone ought to be careful how she accepts help from a rich rancher." Abigail turned. The women froze, faces arranged into innocence too late to be believed. She walked toward them slowly, her boots sounding clear against the wooden floor. "You are right," Abigail said. One woman blinked. "I beg your pardon." A woman alone ought to be careful. She ought to be careful with lenders who smile while writing penalties, careful with suppliers who overcharge men too busy to check figures, careful with neighbors who mistake honest wages for shame because gossip costs them less than kindness. Color rose in the woman's cheeks. Abigail held her gaze. I work for Mr. Mason. I am paid for that work. If either of you want your household accounts corrected, my rate is fair, but I charge extra for whispering. The store went silent. Then somewhere behind a flour barrel, old Mrs. Bell gave one short laugh and did not bother hiding it. Abigail paid for her thread with steady hands and walked out before her knees began shaking. Outside, she pressed one palm against Star's neck. I should have ignored them, she whispered. Star turned her head and bumped Abigail's shoulder as if disagreeing. When Abigail returned to the Mason ranch that afternoon, she did not mention the market. She told herself it did not matter. Words from small minds were only weather, and a person could not spend life answering every gust. But Jacob noticed. He noticed because he always noticed more than he said. At supper, he watched her push potatoes around her plate. Later, when the men had left and the kitchen quieted, he stood near the stove while she dried cups. Something happened in town. She kept drying. Many things happened in town. A child dropped a jar of molasses. Mr. Penn argued over boot nails. Mrs. Bell bought cinnamon she claimed was too expensive and then bought twice as much. Abigail. Her hand stilled. It was the first time he had used her given name without formality. She looked at him. He seemed to realize it at the same moment she did. He did not take it back. Her voice came softer than she intended. People are talking. His jaw tightened. About you working here. About me needing help. About you giving it. About what that must mean, because folks cannot imagine a woman earning her place unless a man has taken pity on her. Jacob's eyes darkened with anger, but he kept his voice low. Tell me who. No. I can speak to them. That is exactly what you cannot do. He stopped. She placed the cup down carefully. If you defend me in town, they will say I needed defending. If you silence them, they will say you had reason to. I have lived under talk before. I can do it again. You should not have to. No, she said, but having someone fight every whisper for me is not freedom either. Jacob looked toward the window. The yard outside had gone blue with evening. I dislike doing nothing, he said. I have noticed. What would respect look like here? The question was so plain, so careful, that Abigail felt something in her chest loosen. She leaned back against the counter. It would look like letting me answer what I choose to answer. It would look like paying me fair and treating me the same in front of others as you do at this table. It would look like not making my life into a cause you must ride out and settle. Jacob nodded slowly. I can do that. And if I ask for help, then I give it. If I do not, then I wait. She looked at him, and for a moment the kitchen felt warmer than the stove could explain. That is respect, she said. He held her gaze. Then that is what I will try to give. Neither of them moved. The quiet stretched, not empty, but full of things not yet ready to be spoken. Then Eli appeared at the back door, opened it halfway, saw them standing too still in the kitchen, and immediately stepped backward. I forgot, he said. Jacob turned. Forgot what? That I did not need anything. He shut the door. Abigail looked down, fighting a smile. Jacob sighed. He will be unbearable. He already is. Yes, Jacob said, but now he will be unbearable with theories. For the first time in many months, Abigail laughed without trying to stop herself. It changed Jacob's face. Not dramatically. He did not grin or speak, but something in his eyes softened with such quiet wonder that Abigail's laughter faded into a different kind of silence. She looked away first. Outside, the last light slipped behind the Montana hills. Inside, the Mason kitchen stood clean and warm, with dishes drying by the stove and ledgers stacked in order on the table. Abigail had come to this ranch to keep from losing her home. Now, against every rule she had made for herself, another place was beginning to feel dangerous in an entirely different way. It was beginning to feel like somewhere she might be missed. If Abigail's courage touched your heart, stay with the story, because the next truth will not come from the town or the ledgers. It will come from something her father left behind. The thing Abigail's father left behind was not found in a locked chest or buried beneath the barn floor. It was found in a crooked drawer at the bottom of Jacob Mason's writing desk. Abigail discovered it on a Thursday afternoon while sorting old receipts from newer ones, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, her pencil tucked behind one ear, and irritation growing steadily in her chest. Jacob had improved in many things since she began working at the ranch, but his desk remained a battlefield of paper. Notes from cattle buyers had been tucked beside feed bills. Fence repair estimates were folded into seed catalogs. A letter from a horse breeder in Helena had somehow found its way inside an empty envelope marked taxes, which nearly made Abigail speak words her father would have pretended not to hear. Eli stood in the doorway with a mug of coffee, watching her pull one paper after another from the drawer. "You know," he said, "that desk has been like that since before I came here." "That is not a defense. It was meant as a warning." "Then you should have given it before I opened the drawer." Eli sipped his coffee. "I feared for my life." "You still should." He grinned. "Yes, Miss Wren." She ignored him and reached deeper into the drawer. Her fingers brushed something stiff beneath a stack of old cattle tags. She pulled it free. It was a small brown envelope, worn at the corners, sealed once but opened long ago. Across the front, in handwriting she knew better than her own, were the words, "For Jacob Mason if the day comes." Abigail stopped breathing. Eli's grin faded. "What is it?" She did not answer. The kitchen, the desk, the whole house seemed to fall away around the shape of those letters. Her father's hand had always slanted slightly to the right. His capital J was plain, his M sharp like a little mountain. She had seen that writing on seed orders, tax forms, church donation records, labels tied to jars of nails, and notes left on the kitchen table when he rode out early. But she had never seen those words. "If the day comes." Her fingers tightened around the envelope. Eli stepped back. "I'll get Mr. Mason." "No." The word came too fast. He paused. Abigail looked at him, trying to steady herself. "Not yet." Eli's expression softened in a way she had not expected from him. He nodded once and left without another word. Abigail remained at the desk. The room had gone strangely quiet. Outside, men worked near the corral. A hammer struck wood. A horse blew sharply through its nose. Somewhere in the house, the stove settled with a click. Ordinary sounds, ordinary afternoon, but the envelope in her hand felt like it had opened a door in the past. She turned it over. The seal had been broken, but carefully. Inside was one folded sheet. She knew she should wait for Jacob. The envelope had his name on it. Her father had given it to him, not to her. That mattered. But her father's writing was inside. Her hand trembled. She set the envelope down on the desk and stepped away as if distance could make the choice easier. Then she crossed to the window and looked toward the barn. Star stood in the paddock near Jacob's dark gelding, both horses quiet in the pale winter sun. The sight of Star steadied her a little. The day comes. What day? The day she had come to the gate, the day her father died, the day debt closed around her throat. or someday Jacob had known about and never mentioned. The thought struck sharp. Had Jacob been holding something back? All the warmth that had slowly gathered in her chest over the past weeks tightened into fear. Trust, she had learned, did not break only when someone lied. Sometimes it cracked when a person left too much unsaid. She returned to the desk, picked up the envelope again, and waited. Jacob came in near dusk, his coat dusty from the south pasture and his gloves tucked into his belt. He stopped when he saw her standing by the writing desk with the envelope in her hand. His face changed. Not guilt exactly. Recognition. That frightened her more. "You know what this is," she said. Jacob removed his hat slowly. "Yes." "My father wrote it." "Yes." "For you." "Yes." She hated the calmness of those answers. "Why is it in your drawer?" "Because he gave it to me." "When?" Jacob looked down at the envelope. "About 3 weeks before he died." Abigail's fingers tightened. "And you never told me." "No." The room seemed colder. She placed the envelope on the desk between them. "Why?" He did not answer quickly. That was Jacob's way, measuring truth before he gave it. Usually she respected that. Tonight it felt like delay. "Because he asked me not to," Jacob said. Abigail let out a hard breath. "My father asked you to keep a letter about me and not tell me. He asked me to open it only if you came to me needing to sell Star." The words landed like a hand against her chest. Abigail stared at him. Jacob's voice remained low. "I opened it the night you first came here." Her mouth went dry. The November gate returned to her in a rush. Star's white head beside her shoulder. $10. Sundown. Jacob saying not a sale. Jacob writing terms. Jacob offering work as if the idea had formed in that moment. "Then the job," she said slowly. "The advance, the paddock, all of it." "The job was real." "That is not what I asked." He looked at her then, and pain moved through his eyes. "Your father hoped I would offer work before I offered money." Abigail stepped back. The room blurred for one sharp second, not from tears, but from anger rising too fast to name. "So he arranged it." "No." "You arranged it." "No." "You read his letter and decided what would happen to me." "Abigail." "No," her voice shook, but she did not lower it. "Do not say my name like that, not right now." Jacob went still. The kitchen door opened a crack, then closed again quickly. Eli had better sense than to enter. Abigail pointed toward the envelope. "For weeks, I have been telling myself this arrangement was fair because the terms were clear, because you did not step over, because you saw me as capable, but you had a letter from my father telling you what to do." "It did not tell me what to do." "Then what did it say?" Jacob looked at the envelope. "You should read it. It is addressed to you. It concerns you. That did not trouble you when you kept it from me." The words hurt as they left her, but she did not take them back. Jacob flinched slightly, not enough for anyone careless to notice. Abigail noticed. He picked up the letter and held it out. She did not take it. "Read it," she said. His jaw tightened, aloud. "Yes." For a moment she thought he might refuse. Then he unfolded the paper. The sheet trembled once in his hand before he steadied it. He began. "Jacob, if this letter is open, then my girl has done the one thing I hoped she would never have to do. She has brought Star to your gate and named a price too small for the horse, because she needs the money more than she needs fairness in that moment." Abigail's throat closed. Jacob paused, but she gave him no mercy. "Keep reading." He did. "She will tell you she is not asking for charity. Believe her, she is not. Abigail has pride enough to stand through a winter with no fire if someone called warmth a favor. Do not insult her by rescuing her like a lost child. She is not lost. She is carrying too much. Abigail turned away. Her father's voice was in every word, plain, dry, loving without decoration. Jacob continued, quieter now. If you can use her help, offer wages, real work, written terms. She keeps the horse unless she decides otherwise. She keeps her land unless she decides otherwise. If you cannot use her help, then buy Star at a fair price and treat the mare kindly. But do not take the horse for $10. Henry Wren did not raise a fool, and I hope I did not send one to your gate. A broken sound escaped Abigail before she could stop it. Jacob lowered the paper. No, she said, wiping her cheek quickly. Finish it. He swallowed. I am writing this because I trust you to understand the difference between helping and taking over. I have seen you with horses and men. You wait better than most. My daughter will need someone who can wait. She will not ask until the roof is falling. She will not rest until her hands fail. She will tell herself she is alone because loneliness is easier than owing anyone. If the day comes, give her fair terms. Give her a choice, and if she walks away, let her. That may be the only way she returns. Jacob stopped. The last lines hung in the room like smoke after a lamp was blown out. Abigail did not face him. If she did, he would see too much. Her father had known. He had known the debt might come, known her pride, known her fear of needing anyone, known somehow that she would rather sell her own heart in the shape of a horse than let a person see how close she was to breaking. And he had trusted Jacob Mason with that knowledge. Not because she was weak, because she was strong enough to make loneliness look like survival. There is more, Jacob said. Her hands tightened at her sides. Read it. He looked down at the page. If by some grace she finds a place in your house beyond wages, remember this. Abigail is not a woman a man wins by doing for her. She is a woman a man keeps faith with by doing beside her. Ask before you act. Speak before you decide. And if you care for her, do not make care another cage. Jacob's voice roughened on the final words. She was my joy. If this letter helps her keep even one piece of what I could not stay to protect, then I am grateful. Use the leather-handled awl I lent you. It suits your hand, and a tool left unused is a sad thing. Henry Wren. The silence afterward was so complete Abigail could hear the wind pressing lightly against the windows. She stood facing the stove, one hand over her mouth. Her anger had not vanished. It had changed shape. It no longer burned cleanly at Jacob. It burned at grief, at love, at her father planning for a day he knew might come, at herself for feeling managed and cherished at the same time. Jacob folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. I should have told you, he said. She closed her eyes. He continued, not because the work was false. It was not. I needed help and you were the best person for it. Not because I followed his instructions against your will. I tried not to, but because the letter was part of the truth and I kept that part to myself. Abigail turned then. His face was open in a way she had never seen. No defense, no explanation raised like a shield, only regret. Why did you keep it? She asked. Because I was afraid if I showed it, you would think the offer came from pity. It did come from pity. No, he said, firmer now. It came from respect. The pity was for the situation, never for you. Her eyes filled again, and that made her angry all over. You do not get to choose how it felt to me. No, he said, I do not. She looked at the letter on the table. All these weeks, I thought you saw me clearly because you were different. I saw you clearly because your father did, then because you proved him right every day. That answer is too good, she said bitterly. It is the honest one. She laughed once, broken and tired, honest after delay. Yes. The words settled between them. Abigail picked up the letter. Her father's handwriting blurred beneath her tears. She folded it once, then again, and held it against her chest. I am taking this home tonight. Yes. And I am not coming tomorrow. Jacob's throat moved. All right. You will not ride after me. No. You will not send Eli. No. You will not decide what I need while I am gone. His eyes held hers. No. She wanted him to argue, because anger was easier when it had something to push against. But Jacob did not. He only stood there with all his good intentions and all his mistakes, letting her choose what to do with both. Abigail put on her coat. At the door she stopped but did not look back. My father trusted you, she said. Jacob's voice came quietly. I know. I am trying to decide if I do. Then she stepped into the cold evening and walked to the paddock, where Star waited with her white head lifted. The ride home was slow. Snow still clung to the shaded edges of the road. The sky had gone lavender over the mountains, and the first stars trembled above Cedar Creek. Abigail held the letter inside her coat the whole way, as if it were warm enough to keep her alive. At the Wren farm she lit the stove, sat at the kitchen table, and read her father's words again. Then again. By midnight the lamp was low, her tea was cold, and the house felt full of a man who had been gone 15 months, but had somehow reached into this winter and touched her hand. When Abigail finally laid her head on her folded arms and wept, she did not know if she was crying because Jacob had hidden the letter, because her father had known her so well, or because somewhere in the middle of hurt, she still wanted to return. And that frightened her most of all. Abigail did not go to the Mason ranch the next morning. She woke before daylight because habit had no respect for heartache. The stove was cold, the window pane silver with frost, and her father's letter lay on the kitchen table where she had left it beside the lamp. For a long moment she sat in bed, staring at the dim shape of it through the open bedroom door. Then she rose. Work still needed doing, even when trust had cracked. That was one thing grief had taught her. Chickens did not wait because a woman had cried at midnight. A horse did not go unfed because a letter had turned her world sideways. Firewood did not walk itself to the stove because a man with careful hands and too many secrets had disappointed her. So Abigail worked. She fed Star. She broke ice from the water trough. She patched the draft beneath the kitchen window with a strip of old flour sack. She carried 2 armloads of wood, swept the porch, and mended a torn sleeve on one of her dresses. She did all of it with the hard steadiness of a woman determined not to feel anything until feeling could be done in private. But the house was too quiet. Every small sound stood alone. The scrape of her chair, the hiss of the kettle, the scratch of her pencil when she tried to work through her own ledger and found herself reading the same line 5 times. By mid-morning, snow began falling again, not a storm this time, only soft wandering flakes drifting from a pale sky. Abigail sat at the kitchen table with her father's letter unfolded before her. She had read it so many times the words no longer surprised her, but they still wounded. Not because they were cruel. Because they were loving in a way she had not been ready to receive. Her father had known she would not ask for help until need had cornered her. He had known she would call loneliness independence if it kept her from owing anyone. He had known she would stand straight at Jacob Mason's gate with a mare worth far more than $10 and pretend the bargain did not hurt. And Jacob had known too. That was the part that would not settle. The job had been real, the wages had been real, the work had mattered. She believed that. She had seen the overpaid invoices, the ruined pantry, the disorder that had wrapped itself around the Mason house. Jacob had needed help whether Henry Wren had written a letter or not. But he had opened her father's words, and then let her believe the offer came only from him. Not a lie exactly, but not the whole truth either. Abigail folded the letter and placed it under her palm. Outside, Star gave a soft whinny. A moment later, a horse answered from the road. Abigail stood so quickly the chair struck the wall. She crossed to the window. Eli Tucker rode into the yard with a bundle of split boards tied behind his saddle and a sack hanging from the horn. He stopped near the porch, lifted both hands as if approaching a skittish animal, and called out before dismounting. "Miss Wren, I was sent with boards only. I was told under threat of death not to fix anything, carry anything into the barn, or display helpfulness without permission." Despite herself, Abigail closed her eyes. Jacob had remembered. She opened the door. "Did Mr. Mason send you?" "Yes. I told him not to send anyone." "He said you told him not to send anyone after you. I was sent before the matter of not coming today." "That sounds like lawyer's nonsense." "I agree. I am only the delivery." She stepped onto the porch, arms folded tight against the cold. "What is in the sack?" "Coffee, nails, and 2 hinges." Her face hardened. Eli added quickly, "All written down at fair cost. There's a paper tied to the sack. Mr. Mason said you may refuse any or all of it, and I am to take back whatever you don't want without comment." Abigail looked at him. Eli shifted in the saddle. "He also said if I tried to persuade you, you would probably make me repair the chicken coop. You should remember that." "I have thought of little else." The corner of her mouth betrayed her. Eli saw it and wisely pretended he had not. He climbed down, untied the bundle, and placed the boards beside the porch steps. Then he took the sack from the horn and set it on top of them. He did not carry anything farther. Abigail noticed. "Is he at the ranch?" she asked before she could stop herself. Eli looked toward the road. "Yes." "Did he send a message?" "No." Her stomach tightened. Then Eli reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "He sent a note." "That is a message." "He said it was not to be called one unless you asked." "That man is impossible." "Yes, Miss Wren." Abigail took the paper. Jacob's handwriting was square and plain, less familiar than her father's but becoming familiar in ways she did not care to admit. She opened it. "Miss Wren, the boards, hinges, nails, and coffee are listed at fair cost on the attached account. Refuse anything you choose. Tucker has instructions not to assist beyond delivery unless you ask him directly. Your position remains yours. Your wages remain unchanged. Your work waits, but it does not bind you. Take whatever time you need. I should have told you about the letter. I am sorry. Jacob Mason." That was all. No defense, no speech, no plea. Just the truth, standing there plainly on paper. Abigail read it twice. Eli was watching the barn roof with great interest. "He wrote that this morning?" she asked. "Yes." "Did he look like he slept?" Eli's eyes flicked toward her. "Do you want the honest answer or the answer that keeps me employed?" "The honest one." "No." Abigail folded the note carefully. Eli cleared his throat. He spent half the night in the kitchen, looking at the desk like it had personally betrayed him. She looked down. "He didn't ask me to say that," Eli added. "He would probably dislike that I did." "Then why say it?" "Because Mr. Mason is good at many things and poor at getting out of his own way." That sounded so exactly like Jacob that Abigail felt the pain in her chest soften around the edges. Eli put one boot in the stirrup. "Mr. Tucker," she said. He stopped. "Leave the boards." "Yes, Miss Wren." "And the hinges." Yes. And the coffee. Wise choice. She gave him a look. He mounted quickly. At the edge of the yard, he turned back. For what it is worth, Miss Wren, he didn't read that letter and decide you were weak. Abigail said nothing. Eli's voice grew quieter. He read it and looked scared. Scared of what? Of failing the man who trusted him, and maybe of failing you before he ever had the right to try. He tipped his hat and rode away before she could answer. Abigail stood on the porch long after he disappeared down the road. By afternoon, she was in the barn with her sleeves rolled, repairing the frame around the broken door. She worked harder than the task required, hammering each nail with more force than the wood deserved. Star watched from her stall. The mare's calm eyes followed every movement, as if judging whether pride made good carpentry. "It does," Abigail told her. Star snorted. The new hinges fit cleanly. The boards were straight and dry. Jacob had chosen well, or Eli had, though Abigail doubted Eli could select a proper hinge without turning it into a joke. When the barn door swung smoothly for the first time in months, Abigail stood back and felt a reluctant satisfaction move through her. She had done the work. She had paid fair. She had used what was offered without letting it own her. That mattered. Near evening, Mrs. Bell came by in a small sleigh driven by her grandson, carrying a basket of mending and news she claimed not to enjoy sharing. She was an older widow with sharp eyes, a kinder heart than her mouth suggested, and the unusual habit of saying directly what other people whispered badly. "I heard you gave the parson's women a lecture in the store," Mrs. Bell said once they were seated at Abigail's table. "I spoke to them." "That is not what I heard." "What did you hear?" "That you charged extra for whispering." Abigail looked down at her tea. "I may have said that." Mrs. Bell's laugh cracked through the kitchen. "Good, they needed it." Abigail smiled faintly. Mrs. Bell grew more serious. "I also heard you have not gone to Mason's today." Abigail's smile faded. "Mason offend you?" "That is not town business." "No, but I am not town. I am nosy with purpose." Abigail almost laughed despite herself. "That may be worse." "Usually is." Mrs. Bell took a sip of tea. "Jacob Mason bought flour from my brother for 3 winters after his mother died because he did not know how much a household needed and was too proud to ask. He overpaid for bad coffee because the merchant told him it was good. He wore a torn sleeve through church once because he did not know how to mend it and would not trouble anyone. That man has needed a woman's sense in that house for years." Abigail stirred her tea, though it did not need stirring. "That sounds like gossip." "It is history. History told with opinions." "All history worth hearing is." Mrs. Bell leaned forward. "I don't know what happened between you and Mason. I won't ask, but I will say this. Good men still make mistakes. Proud women do too. The question is whether the mistake is a door closing or a door asking to be mended." Abigail looked toward the barn. The repaired door stood firm against the coming dark. Mrs. Bell followed her gaze and smiled to herself. "Nice hinges." Abigail sighed. "You know too much." "I am old, that is my reward." After Mrs. Bell left, Abigail sat alone at the table as twilight settled over the farm. Jacob's note lay beside her father's letter. 2 different hands, 2 different men. One gone, one waiting. Take whatever time you need. Her father had written, give her a choice, and if she walks away, let her. That may be the only way she returns. Abigail pressed her fingers to her eyes. The trouble was, walking away had not brought relief. It had brought only distance. The next morning she woke to a clear sky and a hard, bright cold. She fed Star, dressed carefully, braided her hair tighter than usual, and placed both letters in her coat pocket. She did not tell herself she was returning because of wages. She did not tell herself she was returning because the ledgers needed her. She had spent too many years respecting figures to start lying to herself now. She was returning because trust had cracked, but it had not shattered. Because Jacob had made a mistake, then named it honestly. Because her father had known something she was only beginning to understand. And because some doors, once mended properly, opened stronger than before. When Abigail rode into the Mason Ranch yard, the men fell quiet in the careful way men do when they know something important has happened, but value their lives too much to comment. Eli saw her first and turned at once toward the barn. "I suddenly have work far away." "Mr. Tucker," Abigail called. He stopped like a schoolboy caught stealing jam. "Yes, Miss Wren." "The boards fit." He grinned. "I will accept credit for not helping." "You may." He looked absurdly pleased and hurried away. Jacob stood near the corral. He had been tightening a cinch on his gelding, but his hand stopped when he saw her. For a moment, neither moved. Then he came toward her slowly, as if any sudden step might send her away. "Miss Wren," he said. "Mr. Mason." The formality returned like a fence between them, but this time Abigail had built it herself so she could decide where the gate belonged. She dismounted and led Star to the paddock. Jacob did not offer to take the reins. She appreciated that. Only when Star was settled did Abigail turn back to him. "I read the letter again," she said. Jacob's face tightened. "Yes." "And your note?" "Yes." "And I repaired the barn door." "I am glad." "I am still angry." "I understand." "I am not sure you do, but I believe you are trying." "That is fair." She looked toward the house, then back at him. "My position remains." "Yes." "My wages remain." "Yes." "My father's letter stays with me." "Yes." "And from now on, no hidden truths because you think they might make my choices easier." Jacob's gaze held hers. "No hidden truths. Even if the truth makes things harder. Especially then." She nodded once. The wind moved lightly through the yard. Star lowered her head to the hay. Somewhere near the barn, Eli pretended not to be listening and failed. Abigail reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded sheet, not her father's letter, but Jacob's note. "You wrote that you were sorry," she said. "Yes." "Say it." Jacob removed his hat. "I am sorry, Abigail. I should have told you about the letter the night I opened it. I thought keeping it quiet protected your dignity. I was wrong. It kept part of the truth from you, and you had a right to all of it." She swallowed. The apology did not fix everything, but it stood solidly enough to build on. "Good," she said. Jacob waited. Abigail lifted her chin. "Now show me the January supply accounts. I refuse to believe that desk has finished embarrassing both of us." For the first time in 2 days, Jacob's eyes warmed. "Yes, Miss Wren." As they walked toward the house, Abigail felt the letters in her pocket, her father's and Jacob's, pressed close together. One had sent her to this place. The other had given her room to return. She was not ready to call that love. Not yet. But as Jacob opened the door and stepped aside without touching her choices, Abigail knew the story between them had not ended at the broken place. It had only reached the part where both of them had to decide what kind of truth could hold. January came to Cedar Creek with hard blue skies, frozen wagon ruts, and the kind of cold that made every sound seem sharper. The Mason Ranch settled into winter work. Cattle were fed before sunrise. Ice was broken from troughs twice a day. Harness leather stiffened if left too close to the door. Men came inside with red hands and quiet faces. grateful for hot coffee even when they forgot to say so. Abigail kept the stove working, the pantry ordered, and the accounts clean enough that Jacob had begun asking before he paid any bill, which pleased her more than she admitted. Their days found a rhythm again, but it was not the same rhythm as before. Trust had returned, but carefully. It moved between them like a horse once frightened by a bad rope, willing to come close, but watching the hands. Jacob did not press. That was one of his better qualities and one of his more difficult ones. He asked before he changed anything that touched Abigail's work. He left her father's letter alone. He did not mention the night she had found it unless she did first. When she stayed late over accounts, he no longer told her she was done. He asked, would fresh coffee help or would stopping help more? Sometimes she said coffee. Sometimes she said stopping. Once without thinking she said both. He had brought coffee and then closed the ledger himself after she finished the page. She had wanted to argue, but he had only said, you chose both. She could not fight her own answer. That troubled her, because it felt too much like being understood. On the second Monday of January, Abigail rode into Cedar Creek to make her regular payment to Silas Greer. The morning was clear but bitter. Star stepped lively beneath her, proud in the cold, her white coat brushed clean and thick for winter. Abigail carried $2 in an envelope, written in her own hand, with the account number neatly marked in the corner. She had decided to keep paying Greer herself. Jacob knew this. He had not offered to go with her. He had not asked whether she needed more money. He had only said, the road by Miller's Bend is iced, take the upper track. She had taken the upper track. The lending office sat between the barber and the freight desk, with a painted sign that looked more respectable than the man inside deserved. Abigail tied Star outside, patted her neck, and went in. Greer looked up from behind his desk. He was a narrow man with careful hair and pale hands. His smile always seemed to arrive before the feeling behind it did, and today it appeared slowly, as if he had been expecting her. Miss Wren, he said, cold morning. Yes. She placed the envelope on the desk. My January payment. Greer looked at it but did not pick it up. There is no need. Abigail's hand remained on the envelope. What do you mean? The account has been cleared. For a moment she thought she had misheard him. The stove in the corner ticked softly. A wagon rattled past outside. Somewhere beyond the wall the barber laughed. Abigail stared at Greer. Cleared by whom? His smile sharpened. Mr. Mason, of course. The room seemed to tilt. She did not move. Greer opened a ledger and turned it toward her, tapping one pale finger against the line. Payment received. Balance settled. Jacob Mason. $8. The same $8 she had planned to pay slowly, month by month, with money she had earned. Abigail felt the old heat rise in her chest, quick and painful. Not because $8 was a fortune, not because the debt was gone, because someone had stepped into her life and moved a piece of it without asking. Again. Greer watched her face with satisfaction he did not bother to hide. A fortunate arrangement, Miss Wren, very fortunate. A woman in your situation must be relieved to have such a man taking care of matters. Abigail lifted her eyes. The anger inside her went cold. My situation, she said quietly, is that I came here to make a payment on a debt I have honored. Greer leaned back. And now you need not trouble yourself. I will trouble myself with whatever carries my name. His smile faded a little. She took the envelope from the desk and tucked it back into her coat. Her fingers were steady now, which meant her temper had passed from flame into iron. I want a written receipt showing the account is closed, she said. I can provide that. And a copy of the payment entry. That is unnecessary. It is necessary because I asked for it. Greer hesitated. Then he reached for a blank receipt. Abigail waited without blinking while he wrote. She read the receipt before folding it. She read the copied entry too. Then she placed both inside her coat, turned, and walked out. Outside, Cedar Creek moved on as if nothing had happened. A boy carried kindling across the street. Mrs. Bell stood outside the general store, speaking with the Reverend's wife. Two men argued near the freight wagon about a missing crate. Smoke rose from chimneys into a sky so bright it hurt to look at. Abigail placed one hand against Star's warm neck. "He did it again," she whispered. Star turned her head and breathed into Abigail's sleeve. For one moment, Abigail wanted to ride home. Not to the Mason ranch, not to the Ledgers, not to Jacob's steady eyes and careful apologies. Home. To the small house her father built. To the cold rooms and honest silence. To the place where at least every hardship belonged clearly to her. But that would not answer anything. Her father had not raised her to run from a hard conversation. She mounted Star and rode toward the Mason ranch. Jacob was at the north pasture fence when she found him, setting a new rail with Eli. The land behind them lay white and gold under the noon sun. Jacob looked up as she approached, and before she said a word, his expression changed. He knew. That almost made her angrier. Eli looked from Abigail to Jacob, then slowly stepped back with the hammer in his hand. I suddenly remembered the south gate. "You are holding my hammer," Jacob said. "You may want distance more than tools." Eli placed the hammer on the fence post and left quickly. Abigail dismounted. She did not tie Star. The mare stood quietly, watching both of them with dark, intelligent eyes. Jacob removed his gloves. "You went a Greer." "Yes. I meant to tell you." "Went." "He took that without defense, before you went." "But you didn't." "No." The wind moved loose snow across the pasture in thin silver sheets. Abigail took the receipt from her coat and held it up. $8. "Yes." "You paid my debt." "Yes." "Without asking." His jaw tightened. "Yes." She stepped closer. "After the letter, after you apologized, after I told you no hidden truths." This was before that conversation. The word stopped her, but only for a moment. "When?" "January 2nd. She searched his face. "Before I found the letter." "Yes." The anger shifted but did not leave. "And you still did not tell me after." "I should have." "Yes, you should have." Jacob looked toward the mountains, then back at her. "I have no excuse that improves it." "Then don't look for one." "I'm not." She folded the receipt slowly, because if she did not do something with her hands, she might say more than she meant to. "Why?" she asked. His answer came rougher than she expected. "Because I saw you calculating your wages against Greer's penalties, feed costs, roof boards, winter stores, and your own farm taxes. Because I knew the account could be ended with $8. Because I disliked that a man like Greer still had a claim written beside your name. That was not your claim to erase." "I know." "Do you?" "Yes." "No," she said, and her voice trembled now. "You know after, you keep knowing after. That is not the same as respecting before." The word struck him. She saw it. Jacob looked down at his hands. They were red from the cold, nicked along one knuckle from fence work. Strong hands. Good hands. Hands that fixed what was broken, sometimes before asking whether the broken thing wanted to be touched. "I am better with fences than with people," he said quietly. "That is not enough." "No, it is. I do not need you to solve every hard thing in my life." "I know." "Jacob." His eyes lifted at the sound of his name. She had not meant to use it, not like that, not with hurt and care tangled in the same breath, but it was out now and there was no taking it back. I do not need saving, she said. I know. Then why do you keep trying? His face changed. For the first time since she had known him, Jacob Mason looked uncertain not about what was right, but about how much truth a moment could hold. Because I care for you, he said. The winter air seemed to still. Abigail's anger did not disappear. It stood inside her beside something softer, something she had been trying not to name for weeks. Jacob continued, his voice low. And when I care, I act. I see the threat and I move toward it, with cattle, with storms, with broken doors, with bad accounts, with Greer. I tell myself I am helping because the action solves the problem, but people are not fence rails and care is not permission. Abigail's throat tightened. He took one step back, giving her space though she had not moved. I paid the $8 because I did not want you tied to him one day longer. That is the honest reason. It was also wrong to do it without asking. Both things are true. She looked away toward Star. The mare stood loose and peaceful in the snow, her ears flicking toward them, then toward some sound in the trees. Abigail remembered the November day she had come to sell her for $10, how Jacob had written terms, how he had said she could decide, how careful he had been. And how care, once it deepened, seemed to make him careless in a new way. What now? She asked. That is for you to choose. I am tired of choosing from choices you create after you act. He nodded. Then I will not create them. You tell me what makes this right, if anything can. The answer surprised her. She had expected options: repay it, reverse it, add it to wages. He had given such choices before. This time he gave her the open space itself. Abigail looked at the receipt in her hand. The debt was gone. That truth carried relief whether she wanted it or not, but relief did not erase the sting of being overruled by kindness. I will repay the $8, she said. All right. $2 a month, written down. Yes. And you will not refuse it. No. And if you ever again want to help me with money, land, repairs, debt, supplies, or anything that carries my name, you ask first. Yes. Not after. Before. Not through Eli. Directly. Not with a note that gives me pretty choices after you already decided. Before, he said again, directly. She held his gaze. If you cannot do that, I will leave the position. Pain moved across his face, but he did not argue. I understand. And if I stay, it is not because the debt is cleared. No. It is because the work is mine, and the choice is mine. Yes. The wind moved between them. Somewhere behind the barn, Eli pretended to be very interested in the south gate. Jacob picked up the hammer from the fence post, and then seemed to think better of holding anything while this conversation still stood open. He set it down again. There is one more truth, he said. Abigail's heart tightened. What? I would like to court you. The words were simple, proper, terrifying. She stared at him. He did not come closer. I am not asking for an answer today. I have earned the need to wait, but I will not hide the truth because hiding truth has done enough harm already. Abigail looked at this man who had made mistakes large enough to wound her and honest enough to name them. A man who could overstep badly, then stand still while she told him so. A man who cared with action first and speech too late, but was trying, truly trying, to learn the order. She wanted to say no. She wanted to say yes. She wanted her father sitting on the porch with his old hat in his hands, giving one of his plain answers that sounded hard until it saved you. Instead, there was only snow, a white horse, and Jacob Mason waiting. Sunday, she said. His brow moved slightly. Sunday. I will give you an answer Sunday, not about whether I care for you. His face went still. She held his gaze because courage demanded it. "I know whether I care for you," she said. "I need to decide whether I trust you with it." Jacob swallowed once. "That is fair." "No persuasion before then." "No. No gifts. No. No helpful errands." A faint, painful softness touched his mouth. "No helpful errands. And no sending Eli with anything unless the barn is burning." "If the barn is burning, may I come myself?" Despite everything, she almost smiled. "Only if you ask before putting it out." For 1 second his eyes warmed with the same almost smile. Then he nodded. "Sunday." Abigail mounted Star. As she turned toward the road, Eli appeared from behind the barn, leaned on the gate and looked at Jacob. "You alive?" he called. Jacob did not look at him. "Mostly." Eli nodded. "Good, I had money on mostly." Abigail rode away before laughter could betray her. But halfway down the road, with the cold, bright sun on her face and her father's letter against her heart, she understood something she had not understood at the lending office. The debt had been easy to settle. Trust would cost more. And by Sunday, she would have to decide whether Jacob Mason was a man who could learn to love her without taking the reins from her hands. If this moment touched your heart, tell me in the comments what Abigail should choose, because sometimes the hardest question is not whether love is real, but whether love can be trusted. Sunday arrived slowly, as if the whole valley had agreed to make Abigail wait inside her own thoughts. The morning was clear, but clouds gathered beyond the western ridge, pale at first, then heavy with the promise of more snow. Abigail woke before the rooster, not because work called her, but because the question did. It had been sitting beside her bed all night like an unwanted guest. Could she trust Jacob Mason with what she felt? Not with a ledger. He had learned to ask before touching those. Not with Star. The mare had already made her opinion plain by looking more at home in the Mason paddock than Abigail thought proper. Not with money. That would take time, written terms, and more than one apology. But with her heart. That was the dangerous account, the one no pencil could balance. She dressed carefully in her dark green wool dress, the one her father had once said made her look like she belonged to the pines after rain. She brushed her hair until it shone, then braided it simply and pinned it at the back of her neck. She did not dress for Jacob, she told herself. She dressed because Sunday deserved respect. The lie was small enough to let stand. At the kitchen table, she unfolded her father's letter one more time. The paper had begun to soften where her fingers held it most often. Abigail is not a woman a man wins by doing for her. She is a woman a man keeps faith with by doing beside her. She traced the words lightly. Beside her. That was what her father had known. Love, if it was worth anything, could not stand over her with money in its hand. It had to stand beside her with truth in its mouth, even when the truth was clumsy. She folded the letter and tucked it into her coat. Star was waiting at the fence when Abigail stepped outside. The mare lifted her head, white mane bright against the morning. "You have been very opinionated through all this," Abigail said. Star breathed into the cold. "I know you liked him first." The mare nudged the gate. Abigail sighed. "Do not look so smug." She saddled Star and rode toward the Mason ranch with the Sunday church bell faint in the distance. Cedar Creek lay quiet beneath the cold sky. Smoke rose from chimneys. A dog barked once near the blacksmith shop. Wagon tracks cut through the snow along the main road, but she took the ridge path, where the view opened wide over both properties. Her farm sat small against the hill, worn but standing. The Mason land stretched beyond it, broad and rich, cattle moving like slow, dark shadows across the pasture. For months, those two pieces of earth had felt like different worlds. Now Abigail saw how close they had always been, divided only by fences, pride, and the distance people kept when they were afraid of needing one another. Jacob was on the porch when she arrived. He had not come to meet her at the gate. He had not sent Eli. He had not placed flowers on the rail or written another note. He simply stood there with his hat in his hands, waiting. That was good. That was very good. Abigail tied Star to the post and walked to the porch. The cold air moved between them, carrying the smell of wood smoke from the house. "Miss Wren," Jacob said. "Mr. Mason." His eyes searched hers, but did not ask before she was ready. She looked past him through the kitchen window. The table inside was clear except for 2 coffee cups and the account book she had left there on Friday. He had not moved her papers. The realization settled inside her quietly. "You waited," she said. "Yes." "No visit." "No." "No note." "No." "No helpful errand." A faint warmth touched his eyes. "None that reached your property." Her eyebrow lifted. "I repaired the south gate," he said. "It was unrelated." "Was it burning?" "No." "Then you are improving." "I hope so." She sat on the porch step. After a moment, Jacob sat beside her, leaving enough space that the choice of closing it belonged to her. For a while they looked out over the winter yard. Eli was nowhere in sight, which likely meant he had been ordered far away or had placed himself far away to gather better information later. Star stood at the post, calm and satisfied, as if Sunday was merely a formality everyone else was slow to understand. Abigail drew her father's letter from her coat. Jacob's gaze lowered to it, but he said nothing. "I keep thinking about what he wrote," she said. Jacob folded his hands loosely between his knees. "So do I." "He knew me too well." "Yes." "He knew you too." Jacob looked toward the barn. "I have wondered about that. He said you wait better than most." "I failed at that." "You failed at asking before acting." "Yes." "But you waited after I told you to." He looked back at her. "Because you asked me to." "That matters." The words were simple, but they carried more weight than she expected. Jacob seemed to understand. He did not rush to thank her for them. Abigail turned the folded letter over in her hands. "My father always said trust was not a feeling. He said feelings change with weather, hunger, and lack of sleep." "That sounds like Henry." "He said trust was a record." Jacob became very still. "A record of what a person does after they are told the truth," Abigail continued. "Not before. Before is easy. Everyone behaves well when they think they already know the rules. But after they learn where they hurt you, after they hear what matters, after pride has been bruised and excuses would be easier, that is when the record starts." Jacob looked down. She let him sit with that. Then she said, "Your record before was mixed." "That is generous." "It is accurate. You gave fair work. You wrote terms. You respected my horse and my land. You also hid the letter and paid Greer without asking." "Yes." "Your record after is short." "I know. But it is not empty." He lifted his eyes. She held his gaze. "You apologized properly. You gave me space. You sent boards only. You let me be angry without making yourself the injured party. You waited until Sunday." The wind moved a loose strand of hair against her cheek. Jacob's hand shifted once, as if he wanted to brush it away, then stopped. Abigail noticed that too. "So," she said quietly, "I am not giving you my whole trust today." His expression did not fall, but something in it braced. "I would not ask for all of it," he said. "No, you would not now." She looked at Star, then back at him. "But I will give you the chance to earn more." Jacob's breath changed. She saw it, though he tried to hide it. "That means courtship?" he asked. "It means courtship." He closed his eyes briefly, not in triumph, but in relief so deep it looked almost like pain. When he opened them, he said, "Thank you. Do not thank me as if I have handed you a prize." He straightened at once. "No. I am not a prize. I know. I am not a problem you solved. I know that too. And if you forget, I will remind you in terms you will not enjoy." For the first time that day, Jacob smiled fully. It changed his face in a way Abigail was not prepared for. He looked younger, less burdened, like a man glimpsed through a door that had been shut too long. "I believe you," he said. She looked away before she smiled too much. He stood then, walked to the kitchen door and opened it. "May I bring coffee out here?" The question warmed her more than the coat around her shoulders. "Yes," she said, "you may." He returned with 2 cups and handed one to her carefully, as if even a cup of coffee could be offered with respect. They drank on the porch while the clouds gathered, and the ranch yard went about its Sunday quiet. Eli appeared at the barn door once, took one look at them and vanished. Abigail pretended not to see. Jacob did not pretend. He has been insufferable since Friday. Only since Friday. No, but more so. What does he think he knows? That I am a slow man. You are. I know. And that I am stubborn. You are. She turned to him. Jacob looked into his coffee. That was praise. It had better be. It was. The day after Sunday, nothing grand changed, and that was exactly why Abigail trusted it. Jacob did not suddenly become a man of easy words. Abigail did not become soft or simple. The ranch did not turn into a storybook place where all debts were forgotten and every winter morning smelled of roses. Cattle still broke fence rails. Men still tracked mud near the kitchen door. Invoices still needed checking. Greer still crossed the street when Abigail passed, not from guilt, she suspected, but from fear of being spoken to plainly. But something had shifted. Jacob began courting her with the careful steadiness of a man, learning a language late in life. On Wednesday, he asked if she would permit him to ride with her halfway home after work. She asked why only halfway. He said because all the way might feel like guarding, and halfway seemed like company. She allowed it. On Friday, he asked whether he might call her Abigail when they were not discussing wages. She told him he might, but only if she could call him Jacob without him looking like he had been struck by lightning. He said he would try to improve his face. On Sunday after church, he walked beside her from the church steps to Star, and did not touch her elbow when the path turned icy. He only said, "Ice ahead," and let her choose where to place her feet. That small restraint did more to move her heart than any grand gesture could have. People noticed, of course. Cedar Creek had never met a silence it could not fill. The Parsons women whispered less after Mrs. Bell sat beside them at church and announced loudly that honest courtship was a fine cure for foolish tongues. Eli spread no gossip, but his face carried so much satisfaction that men at the feed store began making guesses anyway. Greer watched from the door of his office once as Jacob and Abigail rode past together. Abigail looked straight at him until he went inside. By February, Jacob's courtship had become a known thing. By March, the snow began to soften along the creek banks, and Abigail found herself staying later at the Mason Ranch, not because Ledgers demanded it, but because leaving too soon felt like taking warmth from a room that had only just learned how to hold it. One evening near the end of March, she stood in the barn while Jacob worked on a worn piece of harness leather. The old leather-handled awl lay on the workbench beside him. Her father's tool. He had cleaned it, oiled it, and kept it in use just as Henry Wren would have wanted. Abigail watched his hand close around it, firm and careful, and felt a tender ache rise in her chest. "He lent it to you?" she asked. Jacob nodded, 4 years ago. For what? A saddle repair I was making badly. That also sounds like my father. He watched me struggle for 10 minutes before saying, Mason, if you plan to lose a fight with leather, at least lose it with a better tool. Then he handed me that. Abigail laughed softly. Jacob smiled at the memory. He told me to return it when I learned to use it properly. And did you? I learned to use it. I failed to return it. She picked up the awl and ran her thumb over her father's stamped initials in the handle. H.W. For a moment, grief rose fresh and sharp. Then it settled into something gentler. Her father had not vanished from this place. He had left marks in the tools, in the letter, in the horse standing warm in the paddock, in the kind of man he had trusted. Abigail held the awl out to Jacob. Keep it, she said. His expression changed. It belongs to you. It belongs where it is used well. He did not take it right away. Are you sure? She looked at him. I am. Only then did he accept it. That mattered too. A week later, spring came with mud, swollen creeks, and wild green pushing through the dead grass. Star moved through the pasture like a queen returning to land she owned. Abigail's farm stood cleaner now, the barn door sound, the roof patched, the accounts less frightening. She had paid the first $2 back to Jacob for the Greer debt, and he had written it down without argument. Every term mattered. Every promise kept became another small board in the bridge between them. On an April evening after supper, Abigail sat at the Mason kitchen table reviewing a feed order while Jacob stood by the stove, unusually quiet. Eli passed through once, saw Jacob's face, and immediately backed out. Abigail looked up. What is wrong? Jacob removed his hat, though he was already indoors, which told her something serious was coming. I have been trying to decide whether tonight is the right time, he said. For what? To ask something. Her hand stilled on the ledger. He took a breath, but I realized deciding alone whether it is the right time may be part of the trouble. Abigail's heart began to beat harder. So I am asking first, he said. May I speak plainly? She set down the pencil. Yes. Jacob came to the table but did not sit. His eyes held hers, steady and nervous in equal measure. I love you, Abigail Wren, he said. The words landed softly, but they changed the room. Abigail could hear the stove, the wind at the window, a horse shifting outside. Her own breath caught somewhere between fear and wonder. Jacob continued, I loved you badly before I knew how to do it well. I tried to fix what hurt you instead of standing beside you in it. I am still learning. I expect I will be learning for a long time, but I want to learn with you if you will have me. Her eyes filled, not with the helpless tears she hated, but with the kind that came when a heart heard the truth it had been bracing itself against. Jacob reached into his coat pocket, then stopped. Abigail saw the movement. He smiled faintly at himself. May I? She knew then what he held. She could have made him wait longer. Part of her pride wanted to, part of her fear demanded it. But her trust, not whole, not careless, not blind, stood firmly enough. Yes, she whispered. Jacob took out a small ring. It was simple gold with no showy stone, practical, honest, something a woman could wear while working and not fear breaking. He did not kneel in a theatrical way. He stood before her like a man making a vow he understood would cost him every day after the asking. Will you marry me? He said. Not to leave your land, not to fold your life into mine as if it was waiting to disappear, but to build beside me with your name, your choices, your horse, your father's place, and all the truth we can manage. Abigail looked at him through tears. Then she laughed softly, because only Jacob Mason would include property rights in a marriage proposal, and somehow make it sound like poetry. Yes, she said. His eyes closed for one brief moment. Then he took her hand, waiting until she gave it fully, and slid the ring onto her finger. From outside the kitchen window came a muffled sound. They both turned. Eli's hat vanished beneath the sill. Jacob sighed. He was listening. Abigail wiped her cheek and smiled. Of course he was. The back door opened halfway. Eli leaned in, face solemn and eyes bright with triumph. "For the record, I said April." Jacob stared at him. "You placed a bet on my proposal." "Not a bet," Eli said. "A prediction with financial confidence." Abigail laughed, and this time she did not hide it. Jacob looked at her, hearing that laughter in his kitchen, seeing the ring on her hand, and there was such quiet joy in his face that Abigail felt the last piece of winter inside her begin to thaw. But even joy carried one more question. Because marrying Jacob did not mean giving up the Wren farm. And the whole town of Cedar Creek was about to learn that Abigail Wren had not found a man to save her. She had found one willing to stand beside her while she saved what was hers. The news of Abigail Wren's engagement to Jacob Mason reached Cedar Creek before the church bell finished ringing the next Sunday. By noon, every porch had heard one version of it. By supper, the story had gained details no living person had witnessed. Some said Jacob had proposed in the middle of the street with half the town watching. Others said Abigail had refused him 3 times before accepting just to prove a point. Eli Tucker, when asked, only said he had predicted April and therefore considered himself a man of uncommon wisdom. Abigail did not care much what the town said. Not anymore. She had learned that talk was like wind across open land. It could sting the face, bend the grass, and rattle a loose shutter, but it could not move a house built well enough. And Abigail was learning to build well. The wedding was set for June, when the creek would run clear and the valley would be green. She refused every suggestion that she should sell the Wren farm and move fully into the Mason house, as if marriage meant folding one life neatly inside another. "That land is my father's work," she told Jacob one evening as they stood at the fence between the 2 properties. "And mine." Jacob rested his arms on the rail. "Then it stays yours." No argument. "No." She looked at him sideways. "You thought about arguing." "I thought about asking whether keeping both places would be hard." "That is not arguing." "I am learning the difference." She smiled at that, and the smile came easier now. Together they made plans. Not grand plans, not the kind that sounded pretty and fell apart under weather, but practical ones. The Wren barn would be repaired properly before winter. The east field would be seeded again. The Mason cattle would graze the lower strip in dry months, and Abigail would keep her kitchen garden, her chickens, and the porch where her father had sat every evening with his coffee. The 2 properties would remain 2 properties. But they would no longer stand alone. On a bright June Saturday, Cedar Creek gathered at the small white church near the cottonwoods. Abigail wore a cream dress she had sewn herself, simple and strong, with careful stitches hidden where no one would see them. Mrs. Bell had tried to convince her to add lace at the sleeves. Abigail had refused. Then she had added one narrow line of lace herself and pretended it had been her idea all along. Star stood tied beneath the shade outside the church, brushed until her white coat shone like morning. Eli had placed a small wreath of wildflowers around the mare's neck. Abigail noticed it and looked at him. Eli lifted both hands. "I asked the horse first." Star nosed his shoulder. "Traitor," Abigail whispered to the mare. Inside the church, Jacob waited near the front in his best dark coat, looking as uncomfortable as a man could look while still being deeply happy. His eyes found Abigail when she stepped into the aisle, and the whole room seemed to fall away from her. She did not see the whispering women. She did not see Greer standing at the back with his hat in his hands, looking smaller than he once had. She did not even see Mrs. Bell wiping her eyes with the corner of a handkerchief, while pretending the dust was bad. She saw Jacob, a man who had made mistakes, a man who had owned them, a man who had learned that love was not taking the reins but walking beside the horse and trusting the rider. Before the vows, Jacob reached into his coat and took out something wrapped in a clean cloth. Abigail recognized the shape before he uncovered it. Her father's leather-handled doll. The initials HW were dark against the worn handle, cleaned and oiled, but not polished so much that the years had been erased. Jacob held it out with both hands. "This belonged to your father." Abigail touched the handle, feeling the old ache rise and soften. "He lent it to you." "Yes." "And told you to return it when you learned to use it properly." Jacob nodded. "I think I am still learning." Her eyes filled. The Reverend waited quietly. The church waited too. Abigail took the tool, looked at it, and then placed it back in Jacob's hands. "Then keep using it," she said. "Between both places it has plenty of work left." Jacob looked at her for a long moment, and everyone in the church saw what passed between them, though most did not understand it fully. But Abigail did. Her father had not left her only a horse, a farm, and a warning about debt. He had left her a path, a narrow one hidden beneath pride and grief and hard winter, but a path all the same. Take Star to Mason. He will treat the animal right. Her father had said animal, because Henry Wren never wasted a word and never used two truths when one quiet sentence could carry both. Jacob had treated Star right. Then he had learned to treat Abigail right too. After the ceremony, Cedar Creek spilled into the churchyard beneath a warm June sun. Children ran through the grass. Men talked cattle near the fence. Mrs. Bell kissed Abigail's cheek and told her not to let marriage make her too agreeable. "I have no plans for that," Abigail said. "Good," Mrs. Bell replied. "A man should not be spoiled past usefulness." Eli approached Jacob with a solemn face and an open palm. Jacob frowned. "What is this?" "My winnings." There was no bet. There was a prediction with witnesses. "You said April." "I said before May." "You said April." "I said many things. Some of them were spiritually correct." Abigail laughed so hard she had to turn away. Jacob gave Eli a silver dollar just to make him leave. By autumn, the Wren farm had a new barn door, a sound roof, and a field of winter rye coming up green. Abigail still kept the Mason accounts, but now 2 neighbors paid her to keep theirs as well. She charged fairly and never apologized for it. Greer's office grew quieter after folks learned how closely Abigail could read a ledger. Star roamed both properties as if she owned them outright. She ate from Mason hay, slept in the Wren barn when she pleased, and once stole Eli's hat from a fence post and carried it into the pasture. Eli claimed the horse had never respected him. Abigail told him respect had to be earned. On the first cold evening of the next spring, Abigail sat on the Mason porch with Jacob beside her and 2 cups of coffee between them. Across the valley, the Wren house glowed in the fading light. Not abandoned, not sold, not swallowed by another life. Still hers. Still home. Star grazed near the fence, lifting her head now and then to watch them with calm dark eyes, as if she had known from the beginning how far $10 could carry a person when the right man refused to buy what should never have been sold. Abigail held her coffee and leaned her shoulder lightly against Jacob's. "My father knew," she said. Jacob looked toward the mare, then toward the little farm beyond the fence. "Yes," he said, "I think he did." Abigail smiled through the tenderness in her chest. She had ridden to the Mason gate with a horse named Star, $4 in her pocket, and a price that broke her heart. She had thought she was going there to lose the last living piece of her father's love. Instead, she found work, then truth, then trust, then a home wide enough to hold both her past and her future. And in the last gold of evening, with the mare grazing peacefully between the two properties, Abigail finally understood what her father's last instruction had really meant. He had not sent her to sell her horse. He had sent her where she would be seen. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more emotional Wild West stories, where love, dignity, and second chances still ride across the frontier.